Should be a fun day. I love exploring the presidential libraries and museums. This one's a little confusing though. Daze with Short and the Lion begins right now. The confusing thing is that most presidents, their library and museum are one. Gerald Ford's are not. His library is in Ann Arbor, and that's mainly the documents, and all the memorabilia and stuff that you want to see is at the museum here, and he's buried here as well. And he played for the Michigan Wolverines in Ann Arbor, so that's what this statue's all about and why his library's there. Number 48. I wanted to let you know all that because I was confused myself. I'm like, which one do I go to? Probably end up going to both at some point, but today I really wanted to see the stuff, and the stuff is here. It's right on the water over here. First Lady, Miss Betty Ford of the Betty Ford Center. I love the outside. This is great. I thought this was the entrance, but there's a lot to see on the outside, so we'll look at that first. There's the statue of the president. Of course, he took over for Nixon. He was vice president in the House of Representatives and the U.S. Navy also. And look at this. Says Ford on the outside. Ford 50. And see, yes, his burial site's here. All the memorabilia is on the second floor, but look at this. Symbol of freedom is the Berlin Wall. Big piece of it. I've been lucky to see, not the Berlin Wall in Berlin, but I've seen big pieces of it before. In fact, Los Angeles, over by the Peterson Museum, they have, I think, what's like the biggest section of it all together outside of Germany. Here's a little bit of a timeline of photos of him.
It was a time of national turmoil. President Nixon's Vietnam War.
Now, they told me at the Museum of Presidents in Florida that there was one president who was also king. It was Gerald Ford. His original birth name was Leslie Lynch King, and he was adopted. Apparently his father was very abusive, and so his mother Dorothy fled to Nebraska, and since Leslie King Sr. never provided any support, she changed his name. Called him Junior Ford when he was little. So Father Jerry was Ford Sr., loved him and respected young Junior as though he was his own. There's a young Gerald Ford with his stepfather, Jerry. His father, Jerry, spelled his name J-E-R-R-Y instead of with a G. Says he was very active as a little kid. He would play golf, he would play with the dog, he would go swimming, fishing, scouting. There's his scout troop. Here's a statue of him as a Boy Scout. Kind of the All-American boy. Here he is with the flag as a scout. Oh, look at that. His Eagle Scout badge. Actually, the whole sash with all of the merit badges on there. But then they also have his Eagle Scout medal. A letter from Governor Green to him from Mackinac Island. That's cool. Oh wow, that's gonna be great. Look at that. This is during high school. He would work lunchtime shifts at Bill's Place flipping hamburgers for $2 a week. Plus he'd get free lunch. He said he got his work ethic from Jerry, who owned this paint company, and he went and worked for Jerry one summer cleaning the paint vats. Ford paints. There's some of the original paint cans from that company. That was his high school, South High. And that's him right there. And then, of course, right up there, that's his original Eagle Scout booklet, where it's signed when he was 15, Junior Ford, 649 South Union. And over here they're talking about what a great athlete he was when he went to high school. He was a swimmer, and that was his football trophy right there, as well as a discus that he used when he was in high school in track and field. So here they have some University of Michigan Wolverines jerseys that were worn by Gerald Ford and Willis Ward. And they also have the game ball for what they're talking about here. They're saying that Gerald Ford was friends with Willis Ward, who, when the team was to play Georgia Tech, which was all white in 1934, Gerald Ford refused to play if Willis couldn't play. But the team had already benched Willis, and Willis told Gerald that he wanted him to play. So Gerald Ford wore 48, he played, and they won the game. And it was the only game they won that season. And then this part, they're talking about his career at Michigan. Here they have a map of the campus at the time that he went there, starting in 1933, and then they have his Delta Kappa Epsilon paddle from his fraternity. It says that he continued to be close to his fraternity brothers for the rest of his life. He was the All-Star Center. It says in 1931 he joined one of the best football teams in America. At the end of his first season he was named the most promising freshman. In the next 2 seasons he played backup to an All-American center as Michigan rose to national champions both years. During his senior year, the team's fortunes changed as injuries hit the team, but his teammates named him most valuable player, and he was selected to play in 2 college all-star games. So this trophy here is the Meyer Morton trophy that the coaches give, and they recognize Ford as the team's most promising freshman. That was in 1932. Here was his University of Michigan football helmet. That's cool to see. I like that. The football was signed by the team, but it's kind of faded. And then that's his football pennant and button with him on it. So there's a team photo, and he's right there in the dead center, number 48. This is interesting. Here's a football uniform with the number 23. It says, after playing for Michigan, he was tempted to play professionally. He got offer letters from the Packers and the Lions, but he turned them down in order to pursue his dream of going to law school. However, he played 2 final games in a contest sponsored by the Chicago Tribune. He was picked by football fans who cast over 737,000 votes to create an all-star team to play the Bears. Although the all-star team lost 5-0, the game received considerable press and raised money for Chicago charities. So that's his uniform from that game. That was his typewriter that he used when he was practicing law in Grand Rapids before going to Washington and becoming a congressman. Law school graduation diploma. It says while he was at Yale, he readily accepted the offer to coach junior varsity football at Yale, hoping to attend the law school. Eventually, the law school permitted him to do both. That's cool.
Himself onto a catwalk below. Ford recovers and makes his way to the bridge, where he learns of the magnitude of the Monterey's troubles. The gasoline-fed fire threatens munitions. Damaged ventilation shafts dump thick smoke into boiler rooms, forcing most of the engineering crew to abandon them. The Monterey had lost power.
That's his uniform aboard the Monterey.
The tide began to turn. The fires were extinguished, and the ship had turned westward, rolling easier. Within an hour, the ship's well-trained crew began cleanup and repair. The fire had killed 3 men and injured another 36 crewmen on the Monterey.
Says this is his congressional desk. He used this in Grand Rapids. Many of the mementos, papers, and other things seen on the desk were from when he actually used them. Glass apple paperweight. Kind of cool to see. Definitely not something you see every day. Oh, he's got a ashtray with his pipe. That's definitely something you wouldn't see in most anymore. Oh, there's the First Lady's wedding dress. Betty Bloomer married Jerry Ford in 1948, February of 1948. Not your typical wedding dress, huh? She wore, it says after her wedding, she wore this dress when she traveled to Ann Arbor with her new husband, where he continued campaigning. There's her garter belt. And gold lighter that Betty gave to Jerry. Inscribed, "To the light of my life." She was from here. She grew up, attended Central High School. She went off to dance school, but her career in dance was not her future. She returned to Grand Rapids. After a brief marriage to a high school friend ended in divorce, she met Gerald Ford in 1947. And of course they had a family. Here's his passport. It said on his first official trip abroad, he accompanied Secretary of State John Foster Dulles on a 21-day trip to Korea, Vietnam, and Japan. So from the 1964 election, Ford supported Barry Goldwater. His bid for presidency, however, Goldwater lost to Lyndon Johnson. It was a wake-up call to Republicans who decided they needed to change their outdated approach in leadership. So the glasses were from a fundraiser held for Goldwater, and Ford's badge from the National Convention. There he is on the cover of Newsweek. He was House Minority Leader. And then the AMVETS Award in recognition of enlightened service and leadership to the people of the nation as an outstanding legislator, civic leader, athlete, and American citizen. Now this is talking about the 1968 National Convention when Nixon was nominated, and it said Ford received the gavel as a memento of his role as chairman of the Republican National Committee and National Convention. And then his badge, Chowder and Marching Society Club. Ford and Nixon were both founding members of the Chowder and Marching Society, a group whose names date back to the American Revolution, when citizens would meet over a bowl of chowder to discuss the issues of the day and then march into town to voice their grievances. Wow. Never heard of that until now. So they must have had a friendship in some way, kind of outside of just the political things. Over here we have the official nomination. It says the 25th Amendment was enacted for the first time when President Nixon nominated Gerald Ford to be vice president. And then Ford used this Bible when he was sworn in as vice president. He would use it again less than a year later when taking the oath of office as president. Oh, this looks like this is going to be great. The Oval Office experience. In grateful recognition from Dolores and Bob Hope. Wow. And God bless this museum. They don't have somebody here talking your ear off the whole time. I mean, it's nice to get some information here and there, but sometimes you want to look around at stuff, and I'll be doing these, and they'll want to ask you where you're from and all that stuff, and you're like, you want to know about what's in here. So this is the way it would have looked during his time in office, the portrait of Washington. It's crazy that those are the color curtains they had for so long. I know it took kind of forever for them to update stuff. This is great. You really get a good close-up look at everything. He has a ship's wheel up here. He's got an assortment of pipes over here with his family photos. And he's also got one right here by his chair for the pipes. The gigantic desk. There he is sitting at the desk. This cabinet. And here you can very clearly see what would have been right there in those chairs. I love that they even made it look like the chimney's been used and everything. Okay, last look. I just wanted to give you kind of every angle possible that they allow. Here it talks about his two brushes with death, where he had some assassination attempts on him, and they actually have bulletproof coat and vest. This was issued to Ford in October of 1975, a month after the two assassination attempts. It was It's made of Kevlar with Kevlar lining. And then they have Squeaky Fromm's gun. It said before Fromm could fire a shot, the Secret Service confiscated this semi-automatic weapon. Interesting. And then that's the indictment of Squeaky Fromm. And apparently Sarah Jane Moore, the other person who attempted this, was her explanation from jail. Yep, you gotta deal with that too. That's cool. That's Gerald Ford's briefcase. It said, Americans quickly learned in the first 31 days their new president intended to set a cordial tone in the White House. He promised to meet regularly with the press, and he welcomed the executive mansion groups and individuals who have been long ignored. This was his throughout his time in office. And you can probably guess what that pen's for. President Ford, this might have been what killed his re-election, who knows. President Ford used this ink pen to sign Richard Nixon's pardon. It's the official pardon right next to it, so. And I like how they make it so that you can actually walk around the outside of the Oval Office and see in the windows if you'd like to see it that way. Which who wouldn't, right? Oh, check this out. Albert Caparo suit is the pink flowery one over here. He made clothes for both Susan Ford and Betty Ford. And that's also Betty Ford's dress. And that is also Betty's dress worn during Gerald Ford's presidency. There's a signed game ball from the Washington Redskins and the coach George Allen. They sent it to her when she had her mastectomy as a get well present. That is Betty Ford's gavel from serving as the chair of the board of directors for the Betty Ford Center until she retired. The Gerald Ford Distinguished Service Medal, and here he is awarding it to his wife. Here's Betty Ford's Presidential Medal of Freedom. Here is a dress and tuxedo worn by President and First Lady, and also an example of one of their formal dining setups for one of their galas. And this is talking about the fall of Saigon, the Saigon staircase. Over here is talking about the Apollo-Soyuz joint space mission, and they have the phone that he called. It says the Apollo-Soyuz crew after their successful docking. Henry Kissinger provided talking points for the president to call the crew. This is talking about the bicentennial freedom train, all the celebration of 1976. Here's his campaign for re-election, and he lost to Jimmy Carter. Oh wow, they have the cabinet room as well.
Events where I did bring issues to him, and where I had a difference with, for example,
President Eisenhower's portrait down there.
On a program. And
Cabinet
he would sit at
room.
the cabinet table. He would hear my side, the opponent's side, and sing counsel to him. And I'm also proud to have been part of a tradition of cabinet members that dates all the way back to the first president, George Washington, in service to our great nation.
So these are all cabinet members, and they all have their name on this. The president sits right here. the Secretary of State to the right, and the Secretary of Defense to the left. Right in the dead center of the table, in the center of the room. And in fact, has his name on the back of the chair as well. They did a fantastic job at this museum. I'm excited to go out and pay my respects now. I've never seen his grave. Paintings of the First Lady and Mr. President. So here in the glass it says that they're interred at the gravesite ellipse on the exterior grounds of the museum. So it looks like it's right out there. So let's go out and see him.
He was a guy of calculation.
Oh wow, he got an aircraft named after him. USS Gerald Ford. Gerald R. Ford. Let's go visit the President and First Lady final burial spot. Those are called the Betty Ford Daylily. It says, beyond these gates is the final resting place of our nation's 38th President, Gerald R. Ford, and his wife, Elizabeth B. Ford. Oh, interesting. They do along the way have like a plaque from their children. You can sit and be with the Fords. It says, lives committed to God, country, and love. Gerald R. Ford. 1913, 2006. Elizabeth Bloomer Ford, also known as Betty, 1918 to 2011. May they rest in peace. It's a nice burial spot. And on that note, we'll call it a day. Thank you all for watching. Have a great night from Gerald R. Ford Museum, Grand Rapids, Michigan. Have a great night and goodbye.